All right, welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor, and my co-host, Jaden, and former guest, Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And you can tell by the joyous music that we're going to talk about a really joyful movie. We're talking about Midsommar today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Midsommar.
Yeah.
This is when we, I think, mention a ton.
What episode doesn't have a Midsommar reference?
I'm very jazzed up right now, boys.
I'm glad the wait is finally over. I think we were waiting for October to get here, and let's talk about this really creepy movie.
The titillation has been building for months.
Yeah, we'll have nothing to talk about after this. I think this is the last episode of the podcast. We've done Midsommar. Yeah. We've said all We've said all we need to say about film now.
Yeah, that's so true.
All right, so Jaden, Calvin, and I all watched this movie together. It's kind of the only one since we've been doing the podcast that we all kind of sat down and checked it, besides the stuff we see in theater.
Yeah, without pretense for recording. Like, you guys, we watched Black Widow, and he was like, and we saw Florence Pugh, and I was like, yeah, you absolutely have to watch Midsommar. And
we watched it the next day, didn't we?
Yeah, we watched it the next day, and I have quickly not become the person who's not an expert on this film, because someone has seen it 10 times more than I have.
It's like, I think I've seen it like 12 or 14 times now.
Yeah, so we sat down and watched it, and then I think we recorded the next week, and we were like, talked about, oh man, Midsommar is pretty good. We should do a podcast on it. And Jane's like, I've watched it every day this week. That's crazy.
And so, which is weird, because when we were sitting here watching it, I was like freaking out kind of the whole time.
Yeah, watching.
I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, you were like squirming on the floor. That was actually more fun for me to watch, like than the film had seated enough.
Yeah, you moved from the couch to the floor to like hands on your head. There was a lot of emotion going through you.
And I had to show like my roommates this movie, which like they get off work at different times. Like I was like, we got home, we showed Dom. Cody got home. I was like, hey, I watched it twice that one day. Yeah. And then the next day, Cody's girlfriend came over. Was like, you have to watch this movie. And she's like, I've seen it. I was like, I don't care. We're watching it again.
Yeah. So this movie stayed on my watch list on Amazon for like a year because I had heard enough about it. And we talked about Hereditary earlier, which this is also Hereditary is directed by Ari Aster. This is directed by Ari Aster as well. And so like I knew I needed to be in the right emotional space to watch this movie. Like, this is not just something you just don't throw on Midsommar. You don't just throw on Hereditary. And so I knew, I was like, I need to be prepared for this. I need to be like, okay, I'm ready to get hurt. And so it stayed on my list for a long time. And that's why I was really glad we did that Black Widow one. And then Calvin's like, okay, Florence Pugh is great. We got to watch it. We were all together and it was fun. We usually don't just sit down and like watch something together. And I'm so glad you guys kind of forced me to watch it because this is a wonderful movie.
Yeah, it's great.
And everyone should check it out. A little bit of the stats on it. Like I said, directed by Ari Aster. Came out in 2019. Had a budget of $9 million, and it made $47.8 million in the box office.
That's not enough.
Yeah, it's funny. They actually talked about the other people in the industry had heard that generally sophomore films suck because you get a bigger budget and you try and do way too much. And people had heard that, and it's interesting to find out that the budget was actually lower than that of Hereditary.
Yeah, it's $1 million less.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
And it made like a little more than half as much as Hereditary did. That was like $80 million.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's not enough people saw this.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Like this is it's a fucking masterpiece.
Yeah, and not enough people saw it enough times.
Yeah, for sure. You need to keep watching it.
You didn't have Jaden. There's a bunch of Jadens walking around like, going out of the theater to back to the ticket booth to get another one and head right back.
Yeah,
in,
exactly. Like a small child. One more time, Daddy.
It's like I remember watching the preview for this in the theaters, and I think I was with Jonathan, and like he was very excited. He was like, "Oh, I can't wait to see that movie." And I was like, "I'm never watching that fucking weird ass movie. What is going on the screen right now?" And now I'm pretty enthralled with it.
I love that kind of just your own personal evolution. Yeah. Being like, this looks like shit, and then now you're like, I cannot wait to like. I need to get a podcast that way I can talk about this movie. Exactly. I think that's great.
I need more friends so I can share this movie with everyone.
Yes.
Right. So Jaden, you're the resident expert on Midsommar, I think. So what's your first impression of this film?
First impression was, what the fuck did I just watch? And which made me want to watch it much more and find out much more about it. This is not, it's a horror movie. I would say that 100%. And it's not like any other one you've ever seen. It's so well lit. It's beautifully colored. Like everything around it. It's It's very great. They do amazing things in this movie, especially with like as weird as it sounds, like the mushroom tripping and stuff like that. Like it's not over the top. Like it's just like, hey, these people are fucked up and now they're in these weird situations.
I think it plays a huge role.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a massive role. I just don't think they like.
It's not overstated.
Yeah, they don't like overdo like, oh, there's a fucking dragon on the couch or something like that. Like it's like these people are like not in their correct mind state, and that's basically what they show there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the visuals are like subdued.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, like you said,
and
not
it's
over the top.
very much weakening of the characters coming into this atmosphere they've never been in before. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's so like every small detail in this movie just leads to the final end of it, and like literally every single like second of this movie is like tied into the end of it, and I love that so much.
Yeah, and this is a 2-parter because for a while we were thinking about this being a 3-parter, and then I was like, that sounds like too much work. So we're gonna try and keep it a 2-parter because we have so much subtext to talk about. But yeah, my first impression of this was I love the Scandinavian aesthetic. So that's always something that's very interesting, like the language, the culture. It's so fascinating to me because we have no exposure to it in school like we do with Greek and Roman and other European societies. And so it feels familiar, like an American farm, but it's also like the uncanny valley. Like it's just different enough that everything feels grotesquely alien. And while everything is happening under the brightness of the sun, like there's no darkness to hide anything. It's just all right there. And the horror is that we're out in the open doing all of this. But it's a long-winded breakup movie. It's a subversion of a classic fairy tale with a dark twist. Too short.
It's 2.5 hours long.
I think it's too short too.
It's too short.
Yeah.
There's like and I think you have the director's cut. There's like 30 minutes of this film that got cut out. I guess originally it was going to have an NC-17 rating, and so there's at least 30 minutes that got cut out to make it rated R. Yeah.
Already, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. There's some grotesque scenes in this.
Some bloody penises.
yeah.
My first thought, similar to Jaden, I was like, hands on my head, like, what am I watching right now?
Yeah.
It's so intense, and like second viewing, I think is where I really like got to soak up a lot of the stuff I like most about Ari Aster and how he composes his shots. There's just beautiful stuff happening in this like terrible situation, but just everything I see on screen, like one of the scenes I like the most is when they kind of first enter that like the village that they're going to in Sweden, and there's like that big archway. It's like kind of the sunburst thing, and like you see people walking in through it. It's just an example of how good this guy is at composing shots. And again, I think the second time through is when I got to soak up things like that and soak up a lot of the score and kind of the diegetic and non-diegetic aspects of it. I think all of that works out really well. I will say, leading up to reviewing this, I kept watching it more and more, and I think it got less interesting to me because all like the kind of really like big shocker moments, I already know they're coming, and so I'm kind of just waiting for the moment the movie to get to those scenes when I've watched it again and again. So my big recommendation, I think, for this is watch it one time, be freaked the fuck out. Watch it a second time, really soak it in, and then maybe put it on the shelf for a while. It's a completely opposite dogma than what Jade had.
Yeah, I'd watch this movie 1,000 times.
So for me, this movie, I think, hits home a lot more if you definitely take a breath in between watching it. I can't handle this. I'm ready to, like I said, put this one on the shelf for a while because I watched it a lot leading up to this, and I was like,
I think I'm gonna go home and watch this.
I think
I'm pretty sure.
I've been waiting to watch the director's cut for like months now. I bought it forever ago when I saw it, and I didn't want that to affect, because we're going to do the theatrical release, and then I didn't want to bring in a lot of other interpretations that would be present in the director's cut, because there's a lot of, what is a work? Is it like Blade Runner, where you have the final cut and all of these other things, and they change elements? I just want to talk about the general consensus piece that everyone is aware of. The theatrical cut. Yeah. I'm interested in director's cuts because those are always fun, but I've seen a little bit of it already, and the two scenes that go on longer that they added, I was like, yeah, I actually would have cut those. So
I feel like one day I'm gonna like come down to the little studio where we record, and I'm gonna catch you guys doing your own like private Midsommar podcast. We just talk about it.
We're on episode 487 of the Midsommar podcast.
All right, everybody, we're at minute 1 hour 32 and 23 seconds.
Discuss what's
picking up-
going on at this moment.
So this is how many strands of hair Danny had on her head in this scene.
Yeah. This is, and you can see the continuity carried over from the last 10-second clip we watched last week.
So like I mentioned, I think Ari Aster does a great job of composing all of his shots. So I want to move into like the look of this film.
Yeah, the cinematography here is wonderful. I normally don't, when we review a lot of these things, I don't get hung up a ton on cinematography because I like to mix between the camera work, the subtext, characters, all of that. But man, I just want to gush about the different types of shot selections that he uses here, because he uses them in several different places. Like you have these top down shots. There's several of them. I counted about 11 or 12 unique ones that are not, and that type of shot is not present in Hereditary. You can maybe think of it as equivalent to the dioramas, the flatness of the dollhouse aesthetic. But then you have a lot, again, another thing he likes to do, including mirrors in his shots. You've got this upside down car twisting shot, which is amazing.
That one's great.
And then this extreme depth of field. But Leo, why don't we start with that twisting car shot? Because I think, like Denis in Arrival and Sicario, this shot doesn't have any subject matter in it, but the feeling that you get from how the camera moves creates. It encapsulates everything that's with this film. It's uneasy. We're going somewhere on a journey type thing. So I wonder, this is a very unusual shot because you have the car coming towards the camera, and as it passes beneath the camera, then the camera flips upside down, and then we are from the car's perspective, and we're looking out at the skyline and the trees, and we just move through the trees, and as if we're gliding on the sky upside down. It's visually interesting. It's fun. It's unsettling because the music is also messing with our minds a little bit. And then as we get to the arch that says Helsingland, then we flip and twist, and then we're right back where we were. It feels like, to me, that we've gone through a portal, or some aesthetic things you could think of as this is Alice in Wonderland, and this is the point of no return. I wonder, how does that shot feel to you?
I do think it sets up, by having an odd changing perspective in the camera, it sets you up to feel like, okay, we're going somewhere that it is not comfortable for these characters. It's new to them. It's new to you as the audience. I think it's supposed to put you in that mindset, okay, this is a new area that I'm unfamiliar with. And so I do like how the camera's playing around a lot with its perspective. And yeah, I think that's the whole point of it, is to put you in the kind of that unsettled mood.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's unsettling. I think I mentioned it the first time we watched it, and I was like, why?
Why are we upside down?
Yeah, what is happening right now? And yeah, it is. It just I think it does. It represents that point right there. Boom, they've crossed the line. They're going to a place where they may not return from, or they don't know what's going to happen now.
Yeah. So that shot, I think, is one of those individual shots he doesn't return to, because it says so much on its own. I feel like you would make a gimmicky film if you continued to return to something.
Literally about to say that. If you have a bunch of stuff where it's we're upside down and we're spinning around, then it's gimmicky was exactly what I was going to say.
No, it works because it's done just once.
Yeah.
You don't want to put too much sugar on your ice cream.
Yeah, yeah. I think if he does it a bunch of times, it's oh, look at me, a fancy filmmaker. I can do weird shots, and it's no, one is plenty, and it speaks for itself. You don't need more of it. I agree.
Yeah, but the one thing that he does continue return to in terms of perspective are these top-down shots. I mean, they're everywhere. The firefighters on the stairs at the beginning, Danny walking into the bathroom.
That's genuinely one of my favorite shots of the whole movie.
Yeah, me too. And then she's in the airplane.
Yeah, and I think I talked to Calvin before we recorded. I love kind of just that jump in the timeline where it's she closes the door, and then it jumps to her in the lavatory of the plane. Mm-hmm. There's no anxiety scene where she's going through customs and getting on the plane. It's skip all the boring stuff. Let's just move the movie along. I think it's paced out really well that way, and I love that you can just use kind of a trick of the camera to you're at one point in time, and now you've skipped ahead. You're in Sweden now, and it all makes sense, and it works so well for the film. And it's just nice that you can just do that with a shot. You don't have to have any explanation or dialogue kind of going through that.
Yep.
I like how it pushes the story forward a ton. That's why it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
I'm a big fan of that part too. I think it's great.
Yeah, because we also stay. Not only do we move ahead in time, we also stay in the same mindset. She's still grieving.
Yeah.
and I think that's it's. It says it's light, it's quick, it's a single jump cut, and it says everything you need to know, that we've changed place and we've changed time, but we have not healed from this event at all.
So I moved from that scene, which is one of my favorites in the whole movie, to probably my least favorite shot in the whole movie. It's one of the only gripes I have as far as the cinematography. It cuts to then like I think it's the idea of you're looking out the plane window, you just see like the clouds and the sky, and then the screen just starts like shaking, but it's like artificially done. It's like something done in post. And the score builds at that point, and I guess it's fine if you're just kind of a general audience and you want to see something kind of weird happen. I saw that scene, I was like, why is this in here? Like, you just had a really cool scene with Florence Pugh emoting, and you just got this cool cut between, being in the apartment and moving to the airplane. Why is this weird scene there of the sky shaking? I thought it doesn't fit at all. That's my one gripe as far as the look of this film.
Yeah, I think of it as akin to the near miss accident that is a trope in so many like camping horror movies. Oh no, we almost got hurt. We were almost in an accident. Like, I would have cut that. I don't think it works well.
Yeah, I think moving right from that to them in the car to, again, like we just talked about, another visually interesting scene. Just keep the good stuff in. Like that's just, again, that's like my one gripe as far as like the cinematography and what we're seeing. I just don't understand that scene at all.
Yeah, but speaking more to the top-down shots, we also have the path walking into the commune. We have the table right before Etstupan, where we're looking down at the Othala symbol, that weird like diamond with legs. We have the jumping off the cliff. We have the maypole dance. We just keep coming back to all of these shots, and I wonder what is your experience when you see these? Are they noticeable enough? Do you feel like he's trying to say something with these?
I don't know if he's trying to say anything with it. I think he's just trying to make something look great, which I think is working.
So, and when I say that, then why is it something that's not in Hereditary that it's very prevalent here? So why use it as a convention?
Maybe he wanted his film to be different. Maybe he doesn't want to be the type of director where like, hey, every film is the same blueprint.
Yeah, I think a lot of, because I think of Hereditary compared to this one, Hereditary takes place indoors a lot, and I know that the house is set up in a soundstage to like get the right shots because you couldn't capture that in an actual house, like positioning the camera correctly. Mm-hmm. But so much of this film is outside, and I love that he's able to compose things in two entirely different settings. Like the look of Hereditary is at least in setting is totally different than Midsommar, and I think he still does a great job in both. Like I love the shots in. Do you guys remember when I think it was maybe the second to last episode of Game of Thrones came out, and like Daenerys is like standing up, she's taking over King's Landing, and the wings of the dragon open up behind her. You guys remember that scene?
Goosebumps.
It came up everywhere. It was like, this, they have to teach this in film school. Like, this is cinema. This is peak cinema. I was like, that is like so on the nose, and it's dumb. Like, like it's so obvious that like I hate it. And I think of the way this movie is put together, and it's so subtle in all of its shots, but it's so intriguing at the same time. Like you talked about the top-down shot of the table setup is it forms a rune. That's like I think it's a beautiful shot. Mm-hmm. There's a shot later on of the kind of the temple, the house that is going to be set on fire later, and it's just that big yellow triangle. That's a great shot. Mm-hmm. Like those are the kinds of things like make something that's visually interesting just in and of itself. Like there's not a ton going on around it. It's just like you're just moving through this area, and it's like, oh, what you're seeing on screen is just interesting by itself. Like that's the kind of stuff that if you go to film school, I'd like to see things like that, not dragon wings open up. When I think of something that's like visually interesting, I think of something like Midsommar or Hereditary. I do not think of Daenerys Targaryen.
Like I do. So I was not on board with Game of Thrones for like the last 2 seasons. I could see that it was quickly falling off the rails. But there's a somatic response that I have to things like that, and somatic being like bodily reactions. Like apparently,
like you wanted to retch.
No, like yeah. I mean, I had to choke it down because we were in company. But like the idea of or the somatic response of people who get goosebumps from music. Apparently, that's like a genetic thing. Like half of the population gets that, and the other half doesn't. So like, I am frustrated when I see that because my body is like, oh, literal goosebumps. And I'm like, stop that. We're not impressed by that because that's it's so like, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I'm not like criticizing Game of Thrones. I don't really want to get on that topic.
yeah, but I just want to say like those shots work for those reasons because the body is telling us things that are melodramatic and they're visually interesting because our body finds it that way, not necessarily because the medium itself finds it a visually interesting thing. Yeah. And so that's really the difference here is this interplay of human experience and art form experience.
Yeah, I think something like that in Game of Thrones is obvious in what it's intending, and I think this movie is so much more subtle in all of its shots, and it's like if you just pay attention, you're going to see something amazing. Yeah. You're going to see something that you don't see in many films. Like you're going to like really be involved in this film because this is really similar to Hereditary, where just every scene just takes its time. And that's why I love Ari Aster. This guy can make a movie.
Yeah. And so what I would say about these top-down shots is I do think that they are, rather than going with the dioramas and the dollhouse things that he has in Hereditary, what he's decided to do is go with a different perspective with how he has his exposition in terms of these other art forms. So you have the murals, you have the tapestries, you have paintings in Danny's apartment. And so I think that these are kind of meant to reflect those, like the flatness of paintings. The other thing I can kind of think of is if you wanted to dive into something that's maybe not warranted is that everything is from the perspective of the sun, because that's what they're worshiping is the sun, and that's where all of life is coming from. That's why everything is so bright. So it's this perspective of like this dark force again looking down on people and their little fabricated lives. I think that's reading a little bit too much into it because I think a lot of these top-down shots are just visually interesting with how he wants to create flatness in respect with respect to, again, his extreme use of depth of field where we have these shallow shots where a lot of parts are out of focus because we're looking at a specific character's
like the
reaction.
shot with Danny after the suicide scene.
Yeah, she's just like the edges of that frame are fuzzy. That part's sound is like, yeah, that's crazy. But another great one in terms of the depth of field is when they first walk into the children's house, and we keep we're focusing on Danny as she's walking up and observing all of the murals, and then we rack back to Christian. And Pele is explaining to Christian like how life is divided up into 4 seasons, and then rack back to Danny when she asks the question like what happens with 72. Well, actually it cuts right there, but we keep going. The focus keeps changing as we change who's speaking in that scene.
Yeah,
which is. It's interesting to do that. Like a lot of scenes do that, but there are a lot of films that just want to take you a step back, keep everything in focus, and then we're just not going to mess around with focal length at all.
And I think that's an interesting way to kind of cut between characters without having the camera literally like cut between them, you know, like switching your point of view all the time. It's a nice like device to use to, you know, show who are we supposed to be paying attention to in this scene right now. I think it's an interesting way to doing that, and I prefer it over like, you know, one camera's on Florence Pugh and the other is, you know, on these other characters talking. I prefer the way it's done in this much more than kind of a 2-camera setup for sure.
Yeah, and the most extreme example is actually the lunch scene where Mark is taken away, and we have the camera just trucking in front of the table of all of them, and he keeps passing in front and focusing on different each different character. But as it gets towards the edges of our main characters, we start to see everyone else is out of focus. But sometimes we'll rack back to like someone like Maya, and she's in focus for a moment, and we just keep moving these pieces around as everyone is talking. It's just a lot of fun camera work. It adds a lot of interplay with you as a viewer, just kind of getting around the table and moving through a space rather than something that's static and cutting back and forth between things with a little bit of shaky cam, because everybody wants to add a little bit of shaky cam with, like, in those senses.
I think another scene that I think is dynamic, and it's mostly one long take. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 cuts in it. I like the part where Christian and Josh are talking. It's Jack Rayner and William Jackson Harper. it's when they Christian says he's going to do his thesis on like the same thing, and I just like that scene a lot. There's like blocking that these characters have. They move around, and you end up seeing like the back of Christian, and then the camera moves around to put them both in focus again, and it just captures both of them in the frame as they're going through this dialogue. And again, it's not cutting back and forth. It's not focusing on one character at one time, another character at a different time based on who's speaking. It's just nice to see these two characters kind of this kind of anger growing between them, and you see them both like kind of building up as that scene carries on. And I like that it's not just them standing still talking to each other. The camera's moving, they're moving, and it's like kind of this pacing kind of anxiousness that Christian has, and the camera's following him around. That's like another kind of dynamic bit of filmmaking that I really like in this.
Yeah, and then the last thing that I want to talk about in terms of composition is not necessarily his camera angles or anything, but it's how he loves, again, like in Hereditary, to use mirrors to create interesting composition. So we have several types of mirrors. We have Danny getting her pill out of the cabinet when she's calling Christian when they get back from the party. When the two that I definitely want to talk about are in the apartments are still in America, but there are a couple when they're in Sweden as well. Where she's in the bathroom on shrooms, when Josh is taking photos of the Ruby Rotter, and the May Queen table is like actually like after she's May Queen and they all sit down for the feast, the whole thing is like a mirror as well. But the two that I want to talk about is like when they first get back from the party where she finds out that they're going to Sweden.
Yeah,
I mean that shot is like I could write a whole paper on that shot because it's amazing. Like, what did you think like when you first saw that?
It's freaking wonderful, dude. Like it's stunning to me. It's easy to focus on as a viewer, and it's taking like how you talk all the time about how like dialogue between characters. You don't want them switching back and forth from camera to camera. You want them both in the same set, so you can see them like communicating with each other and their body language and stuff. And this is doing that in just such a like abstract way.
Yeah,
and like it's unconventional, but it totally works.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. I thought it worked great in this scene.
It's going to be a tough time to hear me say anything bad about any of the shots in this.
Yeah.
I had my one gripe, and that's probably all you're going to hear from me the rest of the time.
Right, and it's especially cool because of the paintings and prints behind both of them. So when Danny walks in, she turns to the left to face the right side of the screen, and if you look at there's a small print on the doorway of a woman turned to her left looking back at the dark windows of a building, and she's mirrored in posture in that. And I find it so interesting because it's like another layer of almost what she's thinking right there. And then behind Christian in the painting, you have this weird like naked type symbolic person that looks like it's very much looks like someone in missionary style sex position, which would be foreshadowing later in the film as well. So you have all of these elements with this mirror happening, and it's so much fun how you can say so much about the other symbolic subtext here while still giving an engaging conversation without cutting anything. The camera doesn't even move.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's like everything is just so interesting in and of itself. Like it doesn't need a ton of explanation. You could just kind of take your time and pay attention to what you're watching to, and you can get a lot out of this movie. I think I want to move on to my most favorite mirror scene is when Danny has now been invited to Sweden, and Christian's in the apartment with the other characters, and he's like, I invited her, but she's not really going, and Danny comes in, and you see Christian and Danny in a mirror that's on the back wall, and then in the foreground you have Josh and
Mark and
Pele all sitting on the couch, and the other. She's like, it's such an awkward scene. She's like, yeah, I guess I'm going, and you can tell like they're all so like none of them want to have anything to do with it.
Well, Pele definitely.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
but Mark is a douche.
Yeah, Mark is.
He's the worst.
Yeah, when we get into characters, I have a bit to say about these guys, but I like the composition again. I just think he's so good at just making something interesting, because you could have just have a scene where they're just all in the room, like they all go sit down, and then they just start talking, and that's much more boring than this. It's just an interesting use of mirrors, and I also just
think it helps with the awkwardness too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it kind of like that separation of them too, and it's like
that almost unreality, because Christian is the one that starts there, and he's like telling them, like it's like an image above them telling them like, this is what's happening right now.
Right.
Just so you know, I'm an asshole, and you're just gonna get over it. I love how it's black. It feels black, like an inky space that they're existing in, and it's dirty. And then when you have Danny walk in, and like her head is just barely above the bottom of the frame, and I think that's just so cool too. Is like barely like coming out of this dark space, like she's just barely in allowed in here, even, because it almost, again, it feels like a portal, like this is the beginning of the journey of where we go down the rabbit hole.
Right, exactly. I just think it's visually interesting.
Mm-hmm. And you could just leave it at that, because it's so much fun, just that.
Yeah, again, I think I said it in Hereditary, our podcast on that. Just keep making movies, Ari Aster. I'll watch whatever you like, even if it's subject matter I don't care about. I just want to just make things for me to look at. I love what he does. All right, do we want to move on to the score? I think there's
absolutely.
a lot of super interesting stuff going on with this. So I like how this score works a lot with diegetic and non-diegetic sound. There's parts where it seems like it's non-diegetic, like it's just something that is in the score, like it's not literally happening. And then the camera will turn, and you'll see like people playing flutes and stuff.
Yep.
You find out at that moment, oh, it is diegetic sound. Like this is something that is the characters are experiencing along with the audience.
Yeah.
It's not just sound for the viewer. And I love how the score plays with that a lot. I think there's parts with like drums beating, and there's a lot of great musical elements that I think at first you think it's just happening just for you as the viewer, and then the camera does a great job of like expanding and showing what all is going on, and you capture a lot more, and then you find out like, oh, even the sound is like this is a part of what's going on, and it adds to like the atmosphere of the whole film.
One big thing on that is like it's almost the reverse that is when Danny is crying after she finds out her parents and sister are dead, and it almost becomes part of the score. It's her crying.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I think is very interesting. I was like, this part is creepy, and I love everything about this right now. Like this is, it's scaring me a little bit. It's making me very uncomfortable, and it's doing everything it needs to do to get me into the environment of this scene.
There's a lot of good mixing of sound design and score, like
Yes.
just to, like stuff that's happening to the character and stuff that is for the viewer. It's a great mix of the two, I think.
Yeah, and it's done well throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, and when you actually listen to the soundtrack, her crying is part of
it
is
is.
part
Is
of the
it really?
track. Yeah, I was like,
I love that.
I was listening to it at work, and I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, it's weird.
You guys listen to
like,
weird stuff
The
at
song
work.
is, the track is called like Smoke Screen or something like that too. It's like some weird thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are wild.
What
No,
do you mean?
I don't listen.
What else would we listen to?
I do not listen to the score of one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen. You guys are wild.
I don't think Midsommar is depressing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interpretations there about whether it's enjoyable, whether it's happy, whether it's cathartic, and whether it's depressing.
Oh, the ending is happy.
I don't know
Okay,
about.
I have a different take on that. Is there any other elements of the score that we like here?
I love how it feels like a Disney princess movie in some parts. Like if anybody listened to had seen this movie and then listening to the music that we used at the beginning of it, we were looking for that feeling of it's not really a horror movie in terms of a lot of the music, especially in the melodies. It's more like a folktale, like you would think of in a Disney movie.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like that's like this is like a deceiving horror movie to me because, like we mentioned earlier, it all takes place during the day, and a lot of the music seems kind of joyful, folky music, and it really kind of lulls you into thinking like, oh, maybe this is all right. But then it has these like really scary undertones in it, and the score is like it's helping you maybe feel good, and then you get completely undercut by this film.
Yeah,
Like,
and
Yeah.
you get the feet taken out of you. It's like it's very
yeah,
confusing.
that's
Charlie
foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting Charlie Brown for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and I love too, like just the way it's reflected in how the cult acts. The Horgat are very friendly, and someone mentions, "Oh, I like your dress." You're like, "Oh yeah, it's very girly, isn't it?"
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a lot of
They're very nice people. It feels like
there's a lot of stuff working together to set up kind of the overall tone, and like then to have that it kind of be subverted later on. It's the score, the visuals, it's everything working together, and I think all the films I've liked the most is when I feel like those things are working together, and it's not like the score is just a backdrop to kind of because you need to have sound at some point, or you're just seeing something like obvious visually to like get a point across. Everything is like working in concert really well in this film. All right, so if we're moving on from the score, I want to dive into these characters. I think I have maybe a more negative opinion on these characters than you guys do. I think they're.
No, I don't think so.
I think that there is a really shallow nature to everyone except for Danny.
Absolutely. I think that they're all bad people besides Danny.
And they're also one-dimensional. There's not a lot of nuance to anybody.
Yeah, I think just my first thought is like everyone starts the movie and ends the movie in the same place. There's one character, and I understand this film is from Danny's perspective, and so it obviously makes sense that she should have at least the most profound growth. But none of the other characters do anything.
Yeah.
Like Christian, I just to start with him, he starts out as a crappy boyfriend looking for any excuse to get out of that relationship, and the first opportunity he gets to sleep with that the girl from the village, like he does it, and then that later on leads to like his death. He starts and ends in the exact same place.
I actually would say he gets worse.
I'd say he gets worse too. I think that actually all of them get worse besides Pele and Danny.
Mm-hmm.
Christian starts out as a crappy dude. He ends as a crappy dude who kind of gets his comeuppance, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's some, you can get some satisfaction out of that, I guess. It just, there's no change in this character at all. And I think this movie missed out on an opportunity to be like, give you some other characters to even like gravitate towards and find interesting. None of the other characters are interesting. Do you guys have any thoughts on Christian?
I disagree with you saying that they missed any kind of mark on what they're doing with these characters. I think they did exactly what they needed to with these characters for this film and for Danny, because the film is for Danny. It's not for Christian. Christian is literally just an antagonist of this movie, and he's meant to be a piece of shit. He's meant to be a bad boyfriend, and like his relationship with Danny is like one of the reasons. Like Danny is my favorite character I've seen in any movie I've ever watched.
I think so. Same.
She is like, I relate to her often, like actually like almost everything that she does as far as like mental illness and like her relationship with Christian. The fact like when they're arguing in her apartment when it is the mirror scene and she's like, no, don't go.
Yeah,
After she brings up the
sorry.
problem that she is upset, and I have done that.
That's
multiple
so anxiety
times.
inducing because she's like, it's my fault. It's my fault.
Yeah,
And it's like,
I've done that because like I feel like I'm such a broken person. If I finally get a relationship, I can't let that go, despite how badly I'm being treated. And I feel that coming from her in that scene, and it's like that. Like that's why I think Christian needs to be the way that he is, because if he's not that way, then like her character doesn't make as much sense, and her character is the point of the story.
Yeah, and there's a certain way that this character needs to be written to avoid the tropes of broken girl with family issues. Like needy characters are not treated sympathetically by audiences, and like until you've justified their trauma to almost an extreme extent, you know, it's one thing like we understand anger real quick, like, oh, you've righteous anger, that's fine, I understand that. But people that are like sad, we don't really we don't as audiences empathize enough, because there's so much shame involved with sadness and just in general. And I think it's so interesting to watch her always clutch at her throat when she's sad, when she's grieving, like, because that's I relate to that so much too, because like that's how I emote when I'm sad. Like it's this like these are things that can't be said because it just makes your life more difficult. Like I can't share this with Christian because I'm going to lose him, so I just need to choke this down.
Yeah, I agree with you guys that maybe he's fine as a character, just being a crappy guy, and then he ends as a crappy guy. The other characters, I don't agree with that. Like Josh is another one. He is driven by his thesis. That's what he cares about going into this trip to Sweden, and it's what ultimately gets him killed. Why can't we work in something more dynamic with that character? I think he's super boring. He starts and ends the exact same way.
It's like I said, my whole thing is like with that is it's all based off of Danny, and like he's just supposed to be another pawn in the story for her.
Yeah, how
and
we
like,
get to Helsingland.
Spending too much time or too much development on a character that really doesn't matter, I think is a waste of the movie.
I do wish like I don't think that we need to make them interesting. I just don't think they need as much screen time as they have.
Yeah, that's fine with me too. Take them out.
Yeah, because like that's how we got there. That's plausible. That makes sense. The entire conversation between Christian and Josh about the thesis and who's stealing, that's unnecessary, because we don't. Again, this whole film is about Danny. We don't care about Christian. We get enough that you're an ass. I don't care about. I want you to burn. Like that's the.
And then that scene is just them kind of kicking the dead horse of like,
hey,
Josh is selfish and Christian is a leech. And like that's the way that their relationship and their like who their personalities are and how their dynamics work. And it's just kind of more hammering that in. But
And that's why it always made it like you kind of don't like Josh feels like a level-headed plot device. Like I don't get a lot of selfishness to it, but it makes sense when you think about like these are the people that will put up with me.
Yeah.
And because when you look at them, they're all not great. Like how are they all friends? They don't really seem to like each other.
Yeah.
You know, none of them. Like no, Mark doesn't like anybody.
Nobody should like Mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of, if you want to give a character less screen time, Mark is the one. And I get,
But we can always go with more eyebrows, dude.
that's Will Poulter. He was in what is that RV movie with?
We Are the Millers.
Was that Jason Sudeikis in that?
Yeah.
He's also in
You look
Bandersnatch.
like Jason Sudeikis.
I love. God, he's so funny. I take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
That's great.
no, yeah. I told one girl that we were watching some movie. I was like, my buddy Connor kind of looks like him. She's like, what? She's like, I'll jump his bones.
Oh, yeah. I think Mark is like just this classic horror movie character. He's the annoying guy that the audience cannot wait for him to be killed. But I agree with what you guys say. I hate every character in this except for Danny.
You hate Pele?
Okay, I guess he's the one. He's the one I'd kind of put off. Well, because I kind of think he's
I think he's the worst person.
yeah. But
But
I
don't know about-
I think out of the four main male characters, he's the most important and the most interesting.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I also think that it's also kind of another kind of trope you see in horror movies. It's like the unsuspecting, unassuming good guy who ends up turning on you.
Oh, that's not how I viewed it.
I don't view him as that either.
Yeah, I view him
Really?
as a New Age Viking.
Yeah.
Wow, no, I absolutely think he's lured them there for his own nefarious purpose. That's what I think. And
I
that's
think
what-
he only really cared about luring one person there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, actually. We'll go back and look at some of his dialogue. It's really fun.
Yeah.
I think-
I think that Josh explains the whole purpose in the movie in the car ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
I think if there were things that I would cut, I would definitely cut Mark peeing on the tree. Because the thing I have the problem the most with Mark is like you were saying, Jane, he's the character that you want to die. You want him to see die. He's got the most anticlimactic death of anyone in the film.
He gets skinned and someone else wears
But it's
him.
all it's all
but
off
it's
screen.
so off screen. Like we hear Connie screaming. Simon is
Blood-eagled.
Yeah, he's in a blood eagle. Christian is burned. Josh is beat over the head with his foot sticking out of the ground, and like in the same thing with Ingvar and Ulf. They're also burned. And then you have Ed Stupan. Like you have all of these really gruesome deaths. And the only thing that like is ever mentioned, like with Mark, and he asks like, "What are all the kids playing?" It's like, "Oh, skin the fool." Like, okay, well they're gonna skin him,
Right.
But it's nothing happens. Like we don't see any of
The
it.
character you want to see die most, you like don't even get the satisfaction. of that.
Yeah.
It's like he's turning conventions on our head, and like, but like frustrating is like I would rather I'd rather the one that be the most anticlimactic, like be Christian almost, because for genre expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think now that I've gotten my biggest gripes out of the way, I can talk about stuff I like again. Do we want to dive more into Pele, because we kind of brushed over him and kind of the things I like and don't like about him, but I'd like to dive deeper because he's of that like crew of guys, he's the most interesting one. I agree with Jane had to say about that.
Yeah, I like Pele, and I also like Ingvar to a lesser extent. I think they're aspects of the same type of thing,
Yeah.
same type of person.
I mean, you put your note down here. Pele is a sweet person.
I think he's a sweet person.
I think that he is a god-awful piece of shit the whole entire movie.
I think that he is. I think we think of him as sweet is because it's all through Danny's eyes, and she just wants to be seen by someone. So
I see Pele as a dude who's trying to bang his friend's girlfriend.
yeah, I see that too. But like,
And that's why he's being sweet.
I don't think of it from his perspective. I think of it from Danny's perspective. And when I think of it through Danny's perspective, like, oh wow, this person cares about me. He's giving me a birthday present, actually cares about my birthday. And like for someone in an abusive relationship, like that means it means so much. And I feel like he is a reflection of her attitude towards the Horuga in general, because it's like you've kind of shown me what it means to be like accepted and seen, and I can look past some of this darker shit if it means that I can have like real relationships.
Oh yeah, all he had to do was take everything away from her first.
Well, she didn't have anything.
Because he took it away from her.
I don't think he actually killed the family.
Okay, well, I do.
That's
He took
what-
it away from her.
I don't think he actually killed the family.
Okay, well, I do.
Whoa, that's a theory I haven't heard.
Oh
What?
yeah.
Oh
You didn't
yeah.
know that?
Oh yeah. Pele kills her.
Okay, we can get into that.
Yeah.
In our part 2. where we
There's
get
only
more
one
of our
suicide
theories and
scene
stuff.
in this entire movie.
Oh wow, no, I had never heard of that. I'm excited to hear about
Yeah.
that in part 2. I agree with Jaden. I think he's out of all of them, he's probably the worst because he's so like two-faced in what he's doing. He has this it's like he has this really evil kind of plot I think he wants to carry out, and he's this unassuming nice guy on the outside. He's manipulative, and I think that's like the most horrifying part of it is,
He's
I
very
agree.
likable.
None of them are good people, but he's the worst because he comes across as someone that Danny should be able to rely on. Someone, because he even talks about, it's like, oh, does Christian feel like home? And he's
you
implying
feel
that,
held.
yeah, he's like implying that he could be that to her. And the fact that, but it's all like this, it's like this really two-faced routine he's putting on, and that's what makes him the worst of all of them. I agree with Jaden. I think he's absolutely the worst of that crew. But again, that's why he's the only interesting one, because he actually has some kind of dynamic to his character.
Yeah, it's true.
While everyone else is just
Blank piece of paper.
Yeah.
A teen horror trope.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing to any of these other guys except for Pele, and I think he does. Besides Danny, he's like kind of the only person I'm really interested in, and I think it's because
It's fair.
it's
As far
because
as
more
like, I'd see the rest of the commune as almost like one character.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think of who is it? Civ is kind
Civ,
of
yeah.
she's kind of like the master of ceremony and stuff, and I kind of think everyone is just kind of it's that whole community is like focused through her.
Yep.
And so I agree with that because there's just a couple of side characters like you talked about. Oh, who's it? I think it's Ulf is his name.
Ulf is the one that wasn't volunteered. He brought in new blood.
Oh yeah, because his May Queen wasn't picked, so he had to die.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's maybe little bits of other villagers that show up, but they're not important. And I like to think of kind of that master of ceremony as kind of being the speaker, and she's the one who represents that whole group. Do we have any more?
Yeah, I think we'll get into like more scene discussion. I mean, there's a lot of subtext that we need to get through
Yeah.
that make some of the scene discussions more fleshed out. So we'll get to those in part 2 because we're going to go through a lot of the runic alphabet, the symbols that you see, a lot of the folktale basis for this story, and I think you're actually going to be really surprised at what I've mentioned. What fairy tale is the basis for this film?
Yeah, you've mentioned it a few times. Yeah.
Have I mentioned which one though?
Alex.
No, that's a good cliffhanger for part
No.
2.
No. Okay. All right. Then I am confused, and we will find out.
I'll be tuning in for part 2 for sure to find out.
Yeah, we'll bring
So
you back.
listen to my insane theory about this movie.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we're wrapping this one up. I'm your host, Connor. I got my co-host, Jaden,
Yee.
and former guest, Calvin.
Thanks for having me back.
And thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.